Welcome back to the Fusionary Health Podcast. It's your host, Dr. Shivani Gupta. I'm so excited to have you all here today and to experience my incredible guest, Andie Crosby. Welcome, Andie.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
For sure. Let me make sure my mic is in the right place. Here we go. So Andie Crosby has over 30 years marketing and business development experience working with iconic brands such as Nike, Apple, Gap, Procter & Gamble, and magazines such as Rolling Stone, Glamour, and Vanity Fair. And in 2010, her personal interest in health and wellness converged with an opportunity to build and lead the first marketing team at the Institute for Functional Medicine, IFM. She was the driving force behind a 13x increase in the number of clinicians trained by IFM and a resulting surge in awareness and demand for functional medicine amongst both patients and practitioners. She went on to run the strategic partnerships and innovations team working across the ecosystem to create these natural alliances to further the adoption of functional medicine. Wow, Andie, that's incredible. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you so much. And as we talk today, I think you and your listeners will learn how I got from Glamour magazine to the Institute for Functional Medicine to president of Calroy Health Sciences. It's been a fun journey.
Absolutely. And I can't wait to dive into that. So when it comes to IFM, Institute for Functional Medicine, that is an organization that so many of us in the health and wellness world revere because it was the pioneering organization that created the term functional medicine, organized this concept, organized the structure. And I met Dr. Mark Hyman back in 2003. I graduated college and I got my first job at Canyon Ranch in the Berkshires. And I was so excited because I was a kid in a candy shop ready to learn about integrative medicine. And I remember him being there. I attended his lectures. I was in program coordinating, so I would book his appointments with his patients. And to later see him do Ultra Prevention, his book, and then create this and follow his work and be a student in that way has been incredible. So the fact that you worked with him just gets me so excited.
You know what? Honestly, it was an incredibly transformative opportunity for me because Dr. Mark Hyman, Dr. Jeff Bland, Dr. Bob Roundtree, the list goes on of incredible leaders and visionaries in the integrative and functional medicine world. And it really opened my eyes to, I think, my purpose in life as a business person and as an advocate for root cause medicine and access to more and more patients around the world.
Well, when you started there, what was it like? Because you're obviously part of the inception of it, and the idea of you being part of spreading the word of functional medicine, not just to practitioners who of course needed to hear and understand this and were craving it, but also the patients really excites me. So when you walked in and they were like, "You're great at marketing, help us." What was that moment like, and how did you formulate how you were going to do this?
That's a fun question. Honestly, when I first walked in, I had a lot of trepidation about being the marketing person and not being the clinical expert. And what I really learned that I think you've experienced in your travels with this community is that this community of clinicians are so passionate about what they do and about really changing the way we think about medicine that they really embraced me. And there was no dumb question. And trust me, I tried plenty. They really helped me understand how to articulate functional medicine and how to really translate it to the patient community, and also really how to inspire other docs out there that were suffering burnout or just really not finding the satisfaction they were looking for when they entered medicine, for them to see the opportunity to change the way they practice. So I am so grateful for that time. And it really did transform my life and take me from maybe in my previous marketing experience selling more fashion to thinking about selling health as a concept and inspiring and motivating change. And I just have not looked back since then.
Nice. And taking a step back from that, what got you into marketing in the first place? Like what was the journey into that world? And then when you finally did step into functional medicine, what were some of your favorite aspects of it that you had never heard before? Because I know as I step further and further into the health and wellness world, I keep learning things. I'm like, oh my gosh, what if everyone knew this? We'd have an entirely different planet.
The wonderful thing about it is, I think we live in a world where we often feel like discovery's dead. Like we know it all now. And it just feels like in this world, my mind is constantly expanded about the possibility for health creation, which I think is a very, very exciting topic. So yeah, I got into marketing. I went to Miami University in Ohio, and one of those situations where I just had a very inspiring teacher, and that teacher led me to an opportunity to intern between my junior and senior year and go to Chicago and work for one of the biggest ad agencies in Chicago. So, yeah, that's how I got into marketing. And then eventually, like most people, we get to our late 30s, early 40s, and we start to ask ourselves what our purpose is and how we can take the skills and life experiences that we've developed over the years and put them to maybe a higher use. And that's how I found functional integrative medicine and healthcare.
Nice. And where do you see functional and integrative medicine going over the next 20, 30 years? I mean, I think if you look at it, it's still in its infancy. It's grown exponentially, but there's so much more room for growth.
There really is. And there's a lot of very, very exciting opportunities. I think in the post COVID years, consumers are more and more interested in taking a more proactive role in their health. They're looking at lifestyle modifications that can have a positive effect on their health. We know they're more interested, certainly more conversations today about working out and developing skeletal muscle mass for longevity. The concept of longevity is a pretty new concept in the healthcare world. So I think we are now having a group of patients and consumers that are really proactively looking for this type of care. At the same time, I think part of what we learned in the COVID years is the importance of taking care of root cause issues instead of symptom suppression. We saw so many people suffer worse outcomes with COVID based on some of the root cause issues that they had that were chronic diseases, largely preventable, treatable with the right modifications. So I think we're in a place in healthcare right now where demand and then finally supply, clinicians are really, really getting interested in this type of healthcare, is really driving the industry. So I hope that more and more people will have access to this type of healthcare. It's truly transformative.
True. And one thing you mentioned was the pandemic. The pandemic taught us so much about those of us who need to spend a lot more time on our health, vitamin D levels, gut health, immune health, all those things. And one thing that came out to me loudly from it was heart health. And in my lifetime, I oftentimes share this. My entire family suffers from diabetes. I grew up with my father's mother, my paternal grandmother, needing a quadruple bypass. And I grew up going through that experience. My mom's father passed away of a heart attack. And now recently, someone in my very close family passed away of a heart attack. And in the last year, and I just kept thinking, why are we not doing things differently? Like, don't we know better? And granted, in my grandparents' generation, we did not talk about exercise and cardio and weightlifting and a lot of the things that we talk about now. But even right now, when people like this person who passed away in my life, it was one of those things where they went to the doctor. They were told, oh, you're pre-diabetic. You need to take these things. You need to lose some weight. Went to the cardiologist. Cardiologist said, lose some weight. But at a certain age, this person was like grandpa age, it's not easy for everyone to make those significant lifestyle shifts. So I almost thought to myself, like, if you can't make someone change diet and lifestyle, are there protective measures we need to put in place to support them? And I know that from IFM, you moved into Calroy Health Sciences. So will you share your perspective on what people should understand about their heart health?
Yeah, I think, first of all, I just want to say I'm so sorry for your loss. And
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry that's common for many of us. Cardiovascular disease is the number one killer of women, 1 in 3 deaths each year are due to cardiovascular disease, and about 80% of women between the ages of 40 to 60 have one or more risk factors for coronary heart disease that they aren't even aware of. So, cardiovascular disease actually kills more women than all forms of cancer combined, but only 44% of women recognize that cardiovascular health is something that they really need to pay attention to. So we know cardiovascular health is a major issue amongst both men and women, but as with most diseases, we find that women are most affected and least studied, right? So certainly women, as they pass through the menopausal stage, they are again at a higher increase for cardiovascular disease. So, but having said that, I think the important topic or the important theme of our conversation today is inspiration and motivation, not fear, right? So we know the statistics. To your point, the statistics have been grim for decades. And yet, I think we are at this precipice of a very, very exciting opportunity where we are learning more and more about what the root cause of cardiovascular disease is. And as with anything, when we know the root cause, we have an understanding of how to better approach it and create health. And so I think we're at a very exciting phase right now where we're really beginning to understand what is the root cause of cardiovascular disease and what are some of the treatments, some of the diagnostics that we can use to identify this earlier so that people at earlier stages of their lives can start to address their cardiovascular system. So that seems like a very exciting opportunity to me.
Absolutely. And I think it is so good to stay positive. I normally dwell on the 1 in 3. Are you kidding me right now? We're saying 1 in 3, 1 in 2 for cancer, 1 in 3 for heart attacks in women.
Yes.
Wow, like
Yeah.
that's tremendous. And most people running around are complaining, I have high cholesterol, but I'm not sure what I should do about it. I don't know. And I know when I went to functional medicine, I've been going since 2020 because once 2020 happened, I realized it's time to get real serious about my health and not just fly by the seat of my pants, but really dig into the diagnostic tools that'll give me the data so I can make an impact. And I remember my first functional medicine doc sat me down and goes, I need a calcium what is it called? A calcium stress? Yes, a coronary calcium score on you. I need a lot of blood work on you. You're saying your father and everyone in your life had high cholesterol and you have heart disease in the family? This must be tested. And so she tested everything and
Yeah.
said, actually, yeah, this is something you have to work on. And we have watched my blood work and me and now I'm on my fourth functional medicine doc because we work on different things each year.
Mhm.
Um, they're all like, what is this? Like, why do you run with high cholesterol? What are you eating? What are you doing wrong? As a total health nut. Like I eat the leanest and cleanest and healthiest and best diet I could possibly build for myself. And still it's an issue. So and a lot of women come to me who say in menopause their cholesterol's up and
Yeah.
they haven't changed diet or anything. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, I think that is very much true in the case. And I think, the important thing that I would like listeners to take away from this is, we don't often think about our vascular system. Like you don't really feel it. Sure, if you're working out, you feel your heartbeat, but it tends to be something that we take for granted, much like breathing. When it isn't working, we notice it really quickly and it becomes a state of emergency. But in our day to day life, as we exist, we don't think about it, but we think about people's common fears as they get older: cognitive decline, cancers. All of these really rely on a very, very healthy vascular system. Our vascular system is 60,000 miles long if you laid it out, length, which would wrap around the earth 2.5 times. It's enormous and it has very, very foundational and essential roles in the body. It delivers nutrients, hormones, oxygen to all of your systems, all of your organs in the body. It supports your muscles, your nerves, removes waste and toxins. And it's a key regulator in overall homeostasis and health, but we don't think about it. And I think in your case, I hesitate to say you're fortunate, but sort of the
Yeah.
underlying risk for you because of your familial history, which is
Right.
really important for people to think about. Do you have a familial history? I also would love to share my story, which is someone who had no familial history at all of cardiovascular disease, yet really found some alarming signs. Going back to when I was working for the Institute for Functional Medicine, I considered myself extremely healthy. I was drinking the Kool-Aid, as they say, eating the right diet, working out. I was an ex-college athlete doing the paleo diet, 21% body fat. I really thought I was very healthy. And I went to a conference one day, a healthcare conference, and I did a test called the carotid intermediate thickness test. It's
Mm.
also called a CIMT. And a CIMT measures the extent of carotid atherosclerotic vascular disease. It measures the thickness of the inner two layers of the carotid artery, and it alerts you to any sort of thickening to your arteries, right? And
Sure.
so I went in and took this test and thought I was going to ace it. Like everything in my background in history told me that. But I was 51 years old. I had just gone through menopause. And what I found when I got that CIMT back is that my actual arterial age was 69.
Whoa.
And I had two plaque spots in my artery, and my CIMT score was a 0.76, which put me in the 91st percentile. Like that's the worst percentile you could be in. So
Wow.
here I am walking around, a bit of a time bomb in my arteries. And had I not just casually walked by this booth and had my CIMT test done, I could have been one of those statistics that you often hear about of someone going out for a run and not coming back. So
Wow.
I think it is really important. We do have these diagnostics today that really help us understand and identify if we have an issue, even if we don't have a family history of cardiovascular disease. So that kind of put me on this pathway of really wanting to understand like what was happening with my cardiovascular health. I had heard
Well,
about this company called Calroy Health Sciences, and they had a product called Artiracil, and there was a lot of buzz in the functional medicine physician community because we had just recently learned about the presence of this structure called the
mm,
endothelial glycocalyx. And this particular product was really meant to help to support that structure. That, of course, is the inner lining of the endothelium, which is found in all of your arteries, veins, and capillaries. So I took this product. I was still working at IFM. 6 months later, went to the conference again, did the same test. And
mm,
in 6 months, my arterial age decreased from 69 to 66. My
nice.
percentile risk went from 91 to 84. And one of my plaque areas disappeared. My last test was over a year ago. So I'm currently 57, and my arterial age is down to 58. And my percentile risk is down from 91 to 62. So, in a short period of time, in short, I mean 2.5 years, I was really able to make an impact on some of those markers and reverse the trajectory of my cardiovascular health. And to me, I think that is the exciting story using diagnostics, various diagnostics, whether it's blood work, biomarkers, all the work that you're doing with your clinician, CIMTs,
Mm.
you can discover where you are today and what your vascular health looks like. And then using dietary lifestyle modifications, supplementation, you can begin to reverse your arterial age, which is such an empowering concept to me.
Absolutely. Arterial age, it's not a term I've heard. A lot of us hear about our biological age, and in the biohacking space we talk about like, okay, fine, you're 44 in your body, but you could reverse your age by 20 years, and that's got all of its own impacts in terms of your vitality, brain, everything. But arterial age is so interesting because, like you said, if we are all clogged up in the arteries, we've got these plaques, and we don't have the health of that endothelium, that lining,
Right.
then the transport system that's carrying all nutrients and everything good to our cells down to our toes doesn't have the support it needs to do so. And that's really scary, the idea that we're ticking time bombs walking around, just not realizing it. Is the CIMT test readily available, or do you have to go to the cardiologist for it?
It's a great question. You certainly can get it through cardiologists. There are, as you know, as with most clinicians, different specialties within cardiology. So your preventative cardiologists are more likely to work with you on this type of approach. So I would be looking for a preventative cardiologist. They'll have all kinds of tools in their office to measure vascular and endothelial health. If you go to an integrative or functional medicine practitioner, they also, because vascular health is such a root cause issue for many chronic diseases, many of them are also very well trained to provide these diagnostics. So CIMT is becoming more and more readily available. Many companies are offering this, including a company called Vasolabs. So usually this test will cost out of pocket, maybe about $100. You would do it once a year just to really test and see how you're progressing. But I do very much recommend, if you aren't seeing an integrative functional medicine or preventative cardiologist and you are over the age of 40, boy, there's no time like the present to really do the diagnostics and see where you land.
Absolutely. And I love this message we're sharing today because a lot of times, like you said at the beginning, we forget about heart health. We
Yeah.
just assume that our vasculature is great. And what an interesting assumption we make until we go really dive into blood work. And even when we oftentimes dive into blood work, like I've gone to primary care before, and although the numbers are within range, sometimes way in the past it'd be low on the range, high on the range. So whether it's your cholesterol, your inflammation, there's different markers that can show you, hey, there's something going on here. And I have one of my fusionary practitioners I was talking to who said, I like ordering the coronary calcium score on pretty much the majority of my patients. That's a $100 or less test, but at least it gives us a baseline. And then we're using that baseline going forward. So when I had my test, it came out at, I think, 0, which is the best score of like, you're clean, you're fine. But I think it's important that we get some baseline data on ourselves. And also, this idea of only when you have a coronary incident do you then go to cardiology, to me seems insane. Like,
Yeah.
that's what I've seen historically in my family is, oh, you had a heart attack. Now we're going to deal with this. Why is preventive cardiology not a much bigger conversation? Why isn't everyone who's in the even pre-diabetes, diabetes range, anyone who has their certain numbers up, whether it's cholesterol or other numbers, inflammation up, not being sent down this path of let's go understand our metrics here? Like,
Mm.
why do you think that is?
It's a great question. I think a lot of it is driven by the payer system and what our insurance companies are willing to pay for. They tend to pay more for suppressive care and sort of after disease care than preventative and pre-disease care. Functional and integrative medicine clinicians, as you know, is in your own experience, spend quite a lot of time with patients, and yet insurers usually only pay for maybe 8 minutes of that clinician's time with a patient. So I think the real push and pull right now is trying to increase access for people who are not wealthy to access this kind of care, because right now it is very cash based because there's a gap between what insurance will pay for and what and access, right? But we're also finding clinicians approach this from, I think, some very inventive ways to try to increase care. They'll do group health visits. So maybe you'll find a clinician who has like a cardiovascular care program, a 12-week program. You go through that program with a group. It's efficient for them because they're teaching you the food plan, some of the modifiable lifestyle factors as a group. So it's more time efficient for them. So I think that there's some really interesting and innovative ways that clinicians are working within the system to really expand care here. And that's exciting to me.
Absolutely. I love that. You're so right. It's a shift that's going to come, but for now it's happening in the functional medicine space.
Yes.
My next question, Artiracil. If the point of the ingredient is to help rebuild and clear out and support the endothelial lining, will you share with us the journey of how that came to be? Because I know for me that my journey into the land of turmeric came from my family health history and studying Ayurveda. So I'm always curious, like when someone figures out an ingredient that does something so good, how did they get there?
Yeah. I wonder, absolutely. I think I'll start with how did we discover the sort of main ingredient in the product, and then it might be fun to go back and talk a little bit about like what the heck is the glycocalyx and how does it work.
Yes.
So Dr. Bruce Daniels, who's a board certified internist and an award-winning cardiovascular disease physician, actually discovered Raman sulfate back in 1990. So this is a sulfated polysaccharide. He found this compound by looking at a green seaweed, and it please, your listeners do not need to remember all of these like keywords here, but the green seaweed is called Monostroma nitidum. And this showed some potential in blood vessel support. So he
Hmm.
really started back in the 1990s researching this particular ingredient. He saw some really unique qualities there. At that time, he started working with uh, Dr. Chen, who is currently Calroy Health Sciences co founder and chief scientific officer. So, back through the 90s and the 2000s, Dr. Daniels and Dr. Chen really started to research the properties of this green seaweed. At about that time, we also started to learn more and more about the critical role of the endothelial glycocalyx and overall vascular health. We really started to learn that vascular health is really predicated on this micro thin gel like lining of the endothelium, and that once that really fragile lining started to break down, you started to lose quality of vascular health. So that took us through about 2015 when Calroy Health Sciences began to be born as a company. And Ed Hoyt, who is our CEO, is co-founder with Dr. Chen. Ed Hoyt had founded and sold many dietary supplement companies and innovations over the years. He had retired, and then like many people in their retirement years thought like, wait, I still have much more to do here. There are many more lives I want to impact. So
Yep.
he and Chen partnered on this company, and they founded Calroy, really predicated on this idea of we want to be laser focused in cardiovascular health, and we really want to come up with formulations and dietary supplements that are doing something very unique. We don't want to just come out with another vitamin D or another B complex, right? We don't want to revisit existing terrain. We want to do something truly innovative. And the other thing they did at that time that was really also influenced by Dr. Bruce Daniels was they committed to really putting the research behind the formulations. So many products on the market, as you very well know, kind of rest on the research of a core ingredient, but are not actual research of the finished formulation, the actual product. So Artiracil HP was born, and they have done some over the last 20 years, really exciting research. They've spent about $20 million, cellular, animal, and human studies that really demonstrate its effectiveness in protecting and restoring that glycocalyx layer. And then some of the downstream impacts of that, right? Like everything from vascular elasticity to helping with microcirculation and neuropathy. We have some published case studies in plaque regression that we're really proud of. So, yeah, the company has really put a lot of money, time, and energy behind ensuring the actual finished product is effective.
Nice. And every time you say endothelium, I think of the gut lining. So does this product have any impact on the gut as well?
It's so funny that you mentioned that. It has a lot of synergies with the microbiome, right? There actually is a glycocalyx lining in the gut. So
Nice.
we have studied the product's effect in the cardiovascular system. We have not yet done a published gut study, but we are very excited about looking at that and have some thoughts about that in the future. The other thing that I think is very similar to where we sit with the microbiome is that we know that the glycocalyx is fragile yet dynamic, right? Like we can support the health of it and we can support the destruction of it. So it is sort of where we were with the microbiome about 10, 15 years ago. We're here with the glycocalyx and really beginning to understand the importance to overall health and how to support it.
Nice. And so when it comes to heart health,
Mhm.
we've talked about the artery lining. Um, when it comes to nitric oxide, I know nitric oxide plays a role in bringing our blood flow to where it needs to go, bringing the nutrients to where they need to go. Will you explain nitric oxide and the importance of it? It's not my main topic of expertise.
Yeah. Well, it's an exciting topic. And I think I'll back up for a little bit because we have almost these bookends, right? We have this glycocalyx, which for many years we kind of considered our arteries, veins, and capillaries to look like a garden hose. Like it's just a tube and blood flows through it. But what we've learned as imaging has become more and more crisp and clear is that we have this micro thin glycocalyx lining. And what I want your listeners to imagine the inside of that garden hose, that inner lining there is your endothelium. And the glycocalyx is almost like one of our clinicians calls it almost like a fur coat lining. It actually looks very furry. And it's also very slippery. So this lining is incredibly thin. If you stacked 1,000 of these glycocalyx layer on top of each other, you'd have the width or the thickness of a piece of paper. So think fur coat lining, but very, very thin, very fragile, but very resilient, right? So what this lining actually does is imagine, if you can, blood flowing through your arteries. It kind of moves forward, and then as your heartbeat, it contracts a bit and then moves forward again, right? So there's this forward, back, forward motion of blood flow. And that sheer stress over those tiny little hairs in the glycocalyx is actually what's partially responsible for the body producing nitric oxide. So we've now learned that the health of the glycocalyx layer is critical to the body's own production of nitric oxide. Now, the glycocalyx also does a lot of other things. It's the first line of defense for the endothelial wall. So it determines what gets through to the endothelial wall and what's prevented from getting through to the arterial wall. And that helps to prevent, of course, plaque buildup. So it protects your blood vessels. It acts almost like as a filter of things that get to the endothelium and things that are pulled away from it. And then because of that nitric oxide triggering mechanism, helps trigger nitric oxide. So what is nitric oxide and what does it
Yeah.
do? So nitric oxide is a really exciting topic because I think it was in 1998 was the year that the researchers that really understood the value of nitric oxide got the Nobel Peace Prize. So it's a relatively new concept. And what's interesting about nitric oxide is it's a very short-term, short-lived gas. But essentially what it does is it's a vasodilator. So it really helps with blood vessel pliability. So again, going back to that garden hose example, if you left your garden hose out in the sun for a year, it would start to kind of crack and get hard. It wouldn't be as pliable as a brand new garden hose. This is what age can do to our blood vessels. So keeping a nice, healthy nitric oxide level keeps the blood vessels very pliable. It also improves vasodilation and therefore blood flow. So nitric oxide is critical for everything from cognitive health to energy production, sexual function for both men and women. Let's not forget women in that conversation, and just overall vascular health. Now, what we also know about the standard American diet is that we tend to not eat as many nitrate rich foods as we need to in order to feed the body the nitrate it needs to convert nitrate to nitric oxide, right? So
Interesting.
there are dietary forms that help you convert nitric oxide. But we know standard American diet, we don't tend to eat as much as we need to. We also know just as we age, we naturally produce less nitric oxide. So most people walking into the clinician's office, if they did one of those simple 10, 15-second salivary strip tests, would be deficient in nitric oxide. And some, even if you have a very healthy glycocalyx, we just find that we are not producing enough nitric oxide. I know I don't, even though I've been on Artiracil for 3 years and I'm confident my glycocalyx is pretty healthy, I'm still not producing enough nitric oxide at my age. So we know that many people need nitric oxide and could benefit from nitric oxide supplementation. Yet, what we found when we looked at the industry is that the nitric oxide products that were on the market were certainly very effective. They increased nitric oxide, but they were very short-lived. I mentioned that it is a short-lived gas, right? So the holy grail for Dr. Chen in research and development was to figure out how to develop a nitric oxide product that would give you 24 hours of support based on a single dose. So that's where Vasconox was born. It's our second product. It was meant to work synergistically with Artiracil for complete vascular support. But what's unique about our formulation is that it's a next generation formulation. It recruits hydrogen sulfide as a precursor and a companion gas to nitric oxide. And what that essentially does is it allows the body to store and then release nitric oxide as needed. So in our published studies, we've been able to show that 2 capsules of Vasconox in the morning will keep you above the recommended therapeutic levels for up to 24 hours. And that was a big breakthrough for us.
For sure. It's interesting. Okay. So one product helps to support the lining. One
Yes,
product helps with vasodilation and supporting the pliability and health of those arteries.
exactly.
Um, it's really beautiful because two things. One, I forget sometimes how we as women have to worry about heart health. We think of so many other things. So many other things get media attention, breast cancer and those topics, ovarian cancer. Like we talk a lot about the women stuff in other arenas, but forget heart health. And then I think a lot about our men, how men are, at least all the men I see, are under tremendous stress. A lot of times they don't sleep well. I hear a lot of women complain about how their men don't sleep well,
Yes.
which means they're inflamed. A lot of the men around me won't go to the doctor for their annual checkup. So they're like ticking time bombs. And post pandemic, I'm like, are you guys paying attention to heart health needing to be a daily investment? Like, how are you not understanding this is important?
Yeah.
And so what's interesting is your supplement is going to support heart health, but no one's going to know, like, you don't feel your heart health.
Right.
So it's one of those things you have to take, even though you're not going to feel the difference, which is what most people want.
Yeah. Well, I think what's interesting, going back to your example of men, men tend to discover that they have cardiovascular or vascular issues when they seek some support for erectile function issues,
Sure.
right? Erectile function is a canary in the coal mine for men. It is for women too. It's just less talked about and maybe less diagnosed as with men. So most men find out that they have some underlying endothelial vascular issues because they're seeking some sort of support or treatment for decreased erectile function. So
Got it.
certainly Vasconox can be very effective in increasing blood flow to all parts of the body. And, we know where men tend to care about it in the erectile function arena.
Sure.
Not to stereotype us women because we care about many things, but of course, beauty is one of
I
the
was
things.
thinking hair.
Skin,
Yeah.
nitric oxide, the vascular system, really critical for the health of all organs. And those are just 2 that matter to us.
Sure. Yeah. As soon as you said blood flow, I was like hair, skin, and nails, that would be
Yeah.
beneficial because anytime we're not moving blood, we're not going to get it to all the different places. Another question I had when it comes to this idea of nitric oxide. What are the things that we do to harm ourselves and not have nitric oxide? Because I know in Ayurveda, we teach a lot about oral health and the importance of oral health. And I always say, look, Ayurveda, this ancient science, 5,000 years old, knew oral health mattered and teaches us tongue scraping and oil pulling and all these practices that detox the oral cavity. And isn't it interesting, the direct tie to heart health? And so what are those practices that we do that harm nitric oxide or can support us having better nitric oxide?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And actually the answer is what I love about the answer is it's true for nitric oxide and it's also true for your glycocalyx. So if you take care of these things, you're doing double duty with your vascular system. So one is if you have high blood sugar or you eat a glucose sugar rich diet, you're impacting your glycocalyx. That's going to have a negative effect on nitric oxide production. I think the two big ones that you talk about a lot in Ayurveda, we talk about a lot in Ayurveda and functional medicine, is inflammation. You said it before, like we are an inflamed people today. We are stressed. We, are not eating the right foods. So inflammation in general is a massive trigger for glycocalyx health and then would have an impact on nitric oxide. Also, oxidative stress. So oxidative stress sounds like a fancy word, but essentially what oxidative stress is, it's when harmful molecules called free radicals build up and outnumber the antioxidants in your body. This can lead to cell damage and glycocalyx damage. Of course, high blood pressure. So when your blood pressure is really high and that force is flowing through your veins, arteries, and capillaries, that can wear down the glycocalyx and decrease nitric oxide. And of course, smoking is terrible for both the glycocalyx and nitric oxide. So these are the things that would degrade nitric oxide and also your glycocalyx. I will say one thing that you can do, two things that you can do that are just good, solid practices would be eat a lot of nitrate-rich foods. So cruciferous vegetables, beets, that will really help your body access and convert nitrates needed for nitric oxide. Now, you are dependent on the oral microbiome for that conversion to happen. Back to your point about what's the connection between oral health and vascular health. So nitrate-rich diet, you get a nice little boost in nitric oxide after you've had a workout, a cardiovascular workout, or that will really help increase blood flow. That increased blood flow then helps trigger nitric oxide. Interestingly enough, nitric oxide supplementation also has a positive impact on your workout. So if you are someone who enjoys going to the gym or going for a run or bike ride, nitric oxide supplementation will really help with vasodilation. So you'll get more oxygen to your lungs, to your brain. Your workouts will feel easier. Your recovery will be easier.
Oh, I love that. That I can sign up for. Because when I work out,
easy, right?
yeah, when I work out, I go hard, and then I'm like, oh my gosh, the next day today's my off day because I needed a day to recover from what I did yesterday.
Yeah.
So are there any final messages or thoughts or lessons on vascular health and our vascular system that I didn't ask you about that you wanted to cover today?
Gosh, I think, what I will say is we covered so many things that are critical to vascular health. We covered how important I think it is at any age, but especially if you're over the age of 40. If you haven't really had that conversation with your clinician about your familial history and what your current biomarkers are showing you about your vascular health, I strongly urge you to do that, to not be amongst the population of people that don't think about your vascular system until you're in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. So take preventative care with your vascular health. And then I would also say, to anyone in our universe, that to really pay attention to dietary supplementation can be very supportive of overall health. And also really take a look at the source of those ingredients, the quality of the ingredients. Does the company have the research to support that the product is effective. So I would just say that those would be my pieces of advice. Look upstream, take care of your vascular health, and then just really check out the reputation of the companies that you're buying your dietary supplements from.
Absolutely. And Andie, where can everyone find you and your website and the details about Calroy if they want to look up more about the science and the different things we talked about today?
Well, I'm super excited to say two things. First of all, you can go to calroy.com. That's CALROY.com. And the website has got all kinds of information on your glycocalyx and nitric oxide and how to measure it, and studies and formulation specific published studies that you can access. And if you go to calroy.com, again, CALROY.com/Fusionary, we have a special landing page for the Fusionary Health listeners. They can get up to 15% off a 3-month supply of Artiracil and Vasconox and be on their way to a healthy future.
Awesome. I love that. I think it's so important that we invest in our health in each and every way. Thank you, Andie, for coming on the podcast today. And it's just so important that we invest in our health each and every way, each and every day. And that's why I have this podcast. The Fusionary Health Podcast is just here to show each of us, and I get to learn so much from each of my guests. But the goal today was to show all of you there's new approaches, different ways that we can approach each system of health in our life. And it's our job to go out and find what's going to work for us and know our numbers, know what matters for our health. So thank you, listeners, for joining today on the podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please like, share it, leave a review. That's what helps us get information like this out into the world to those who need it most. So thanks for joining today, Andie, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for joining me for this episode. Check out our sponsor, Fusionary Formulas, the potent turmeric supplement used by doctors around the U.S. for patients with pain and inflammation. www.fusionaryformulas.com. I'm your host, Dr. Shivani Gupta. For more, visit shivanigupta.com. Subscribe to this podcast in Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Click the follow button or subscribe in any of the apps that you use. That's all I've got for you on the Fusionary Health Podcast this week. You have the power to transform your health and achieve vibrant health starting today.